You're sitting there, not wanting to be forgotten about. You want to be Saladin's little Iron Lord, and not his young wolf. What do you do in a time like this? Well, me personally, I would watch this breakdown and click the link for
Raid Shadow Legends.
My favorite raid is Raid Shadow Legends, and my favorite PvE champion in the game is built for boss damage, Acrizia. And this month, Raid is increasing their roster of other mythical champions. These new mythical champions have a special new mechanic called Metamorph that allows them to change between two different forms, and I'm so incredibly hyped for this. For mythical champions, you can even summon them with the brand new primal shards in the portal, and a mythical champion's two forms both use the same artifacts, accessories, masteries, and blessings, so make sure you're careful when choosing how to use them. We can't talk about mythical champions without bringing up Xena and her full new kit to master, like her fighting ability, letting her ignore enemies' defenses and deal massive damage depending on how many buffs they've got. You can summon her through ancient or sacred shards during the special summon boosts every week between November 10th and January 19th. Combine more mythical champions with what I already love in the game, the endless ways of optimization, and the art of champions, and you could say this is a pretty good month for Raid fans. New players, hi, I want you to click the link in the description or scan the QR code right here. You'll get a free starter pack with this cool in-game loot. So just hit my link in the description and I'll see you on the battlefield. Thanks to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video, and make sure you guys click the link. Welcome to the expansion that Bungie wants you to forget about, for some reason. So what did Rise of Iron do to piss off Bungie? Why does Bungie want you to forget about this DLC? If you've played Destiny for a long time, you would know that Bungie loves to place references and callbacks to DLCs, bosses, especially to its most memorable times. But almost nowhere is Rise of Iron acknowledged or referenced. Saladin calls us Young Wolf in Destiny 2, even though by the end of the story of Rise of Iron, we become Iron Lord. Siva is only referenced in the Eververse, and only a piece of dead Siva is featured in the Felwinter mission that is no longer in Destiny 2. Most recently, when Bungie was celebrating 10 years of Destiny, where plenty of other trailers get played along the journey, we see Rise of Iron come up, and this happened. This video will be your trip back to 2016 to see what this expansion did to piss modern day Bungie off so much. If you're a fan of this video, I do recommend ringing the bell notification, because it's a bell, and it might even play the Iron Lord's theme. Also subscribe. A follow-up to The Taken King had to be different in almost every way. You couldn't match the fierce and dominant power of Oryx's claustrophobic dreadnought, but you could rise to the challenge. On February 11th of 2016, just before the April update for Destiny and during the Crimson Days holiday event, Rise of Iron was officially confirmed by Bungie. The goal for the smaller development team led by Christopher Barrett was to push a DLC that would have to satisfy the Destiny fandom's cravings, while wrapping the game up for the Destiny 2 release the next year. In the original planned timeline of Destiny, Rise of Iron may have been named Forge of Gods against Cabal or Vex Void against Eververse? Just kidding, that fight's been going on since 2015. The first signs Bungie might want you to forget about Rise of Iron's existence might be the first move the DLC would make, dropping old hardware. Ever since 2016 with Rise of Iron, Bungie hasn't forced new hardware on any player. The reason back then, as Christopher Barrett stated, was, quote, to continue to add new stuff, we would start to have to take things away. And so we really wanted to make sure Rise of Iron was the best experience possible. Rise of Iron would require stronger consoles, and since Siva was this all-powerful force to reckon with, maybe your old hardware would become siva infested without a touch-up. That's not too far off, as the infestation of siva began to spread in September of 2016. 4 days before the release of the DLC, players began to get sick.
So first of all, if you have no clue what is happening, there are infections spreading amongst Guardians from various different activities. I've heard people getting this infection in strikes, in the Crucible, etc. So it looks like it's spreading no matter what activity you are doing. What these diseases do is that they give you bonus XP and reputation gain. So they're actually kind of a good disease.
The other big issue is that said infections might lead to problems when Rise of Iron launches. All of the lore seems to indicate, at least everything that they're releasing, seems to indicate that there could be a huge problem with the way that these nanites, which is what they're called, operate. And even though right now they're being helpful, they could completely sabotage your systems as a Guardian.
Infections were spreading. Brilliance 3.2, Glory 2.1, Splendor 2.6, Magnificence 2.0, Fortitude 3.1. All viruses spread from one player to another simply by being killed or killing in the Crucible. These infections spread like wildfire to anyone who was playing the game. And since these infections would come just a few years before the world was locked down, maybe Bungie wants you to forget about this chapter, or the CDC might be giving them a call. The Vanguard caught wind of this and called up Owl Sector to intercept, but they were too late. 1/3 of all Guardians became infected. The plague was said to have started on Mars, but the trail would lead to the Fallen being responsible. This style of Destiny was when Bungie was their most connected to the community, in my opinion, laying blueprints about a week or two before a DLC's expansion. It really went a long way to make the universe feel lively. This wouldn't be the last time Chris Barrett and his smaller development team would do this, as he would go on to co-direct Forsaken, filled with its own events, and now Marathon, which has already seen its own puzzles blended into the promotional material. With Guardians sick, they would need to report their cases to Owl Sector, who would have something up their sleeve. On September 20th of 2016, almost a freaking decade ago at this point, Bungie's smaller development team made their mark on the open environment of the Plaguelands. This was in direct contrast to the claustrophobic Dreadnought, and more focused on paying tribute to the Iron Lords.
In the years after the collapse, the world had no Guardians. It had only Iron Lords. Immortal, fearless, we fought to protect the survivors of a once great age. Our battle was about more than crawling back from the shadows. The Iron Lords would give humanity back its future.
When you think of Siva, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Say it with me now. Venom. Carnage works too. Siva was a tool, a faceless villain. In the right hands, it could power entire cities, like we would come to find out with the 0 Hour mission in Destiny 2. In the wrong hands, it could rally the fallen Devil Splicers to embrace evil much further. Rise of Iron told a self-contained story of the Iron Lord's misfortune, one that started off with the mission King of the Mountain.
Some know the legend, but no one truly knows how the Iron Lords died their final deaths. That was something you had to be there for, to witness, to remember, to know even heroes can die, and survival is not always a victory. A group of Fallen has captured Felwinter Peak. My team and I are en route, but we won't get there in time. I need you to secure the observatory at the top. It is imperative the Fallen do not establish a foothold on that mountain.
The Iron Lords were guardians before guardians existed. They were gods in their own era, and ripped down by the force of Siva. Lord Saladin, a previously unexplored character from the Iron Banner event, brought players into his traumatic tale. In the King of the Mountain mission, we are tasked with investigating an observatory somewhere on the Cosmodrome, a place known as Felwinter's Peak. Felwinter is a name we will be hearing about a lot, and one of the only names Bungie would ever reference in Destiny 2 from Rise of Iron. I feel like Bungie is consistently good with their opening missions. With Rise of Iron, it's no exception. You are fighting against the harsh colds of the mountain and riding a gondola while shooting enemies. On my playthrough, which was streamed on Twitch, so make sure you guys follow for more retrospective playthroughs in the future, I noticed that while the gondola was a cool concept, it could have been so much more intense. Imagine fighting to keep yourself stable while hordes of Fallen try to climb in, shooting from the mountaintops, and raise the intensity by offering different gondolas to jump to before yours falls. After battling some Fallen, the doors of the gondola were blown open, and so I jumped to action and learned yet again that weather effects were not a new thing in Beyond Light like Bungie claimed in Destiny 2. They really did forget about this DLC. Once I reached the top of the mountain, a familiar looking place in Destiny 2 was here, Vostok. After killing some Fallen, a superpowered friend showed up. Is that Sepix?
Servitor. Sepix Prime. It's supposed to be dead.
This wasn't the first or the last time we were ever going to see Sepix in the DLC.
All this trouble to break into an old temple?
Even old wolves still bite. Shiro, what's your status?
Circling around to make sure the area is clear. Be there in a sec.
Well done, Guardian. The temple is secure. Now we can...
Shiro, get a lock on it.
I just picked up... Wait. Multiple impacts near the wall in Sector 17.
They're attacking the sensor grid. They must know where Siva is. Guardian, go to the Cosmodrome immediately. If Sepix escapes, the Fallen won't be our only problem.
Felwinter's Peak was now open, and with the peak came some characters that you will never see again. I do think it's possible that Bungie puts them in the Final Shape campaign as a reference, but Tyra Karn is the Cryptarch here. And yes, she was in Destiny 2, until the farm got hit by sunsetting. Tyra never really mentioned Rise of Iron, and in Destiny 2, she talks to you like you just met when you first talked to her on the farm.
The hero of the Red War has come down to the farm, huh? Are you here to see me, or are you looking for a soccer ball?
The other NPC, this one to never be seen again, was named Shiro 4. You might be thinking that he sounds like Cade and has the same cadence, and you would be right. Shiro was the overseer of the Plaguelands, the focal point of this DLC, but why he didn't just replace Cade as the Hunter Vanguard is beyond me. I know Cade had a dare to become the Vanguard's lead, but I just think Bungie didn't want Shiro by the time Forsaken was out, so he will remain in 2016 for now. What Shiro and Tyra both offer relates more to the endgame, but Tyra was a better Cryptarch than Evil Rahul. Maybe Bungie wanted you to forget about Rise of Iron because Felwinter's Peak had a climbing challenge unlike any other. Climbing the mountain was worth the pain it offered, and it offered lots of pain.
I was at a really high point. I just saw sweats fucking.
The mountain sort of came back in Destiny 2 briefly during the Lie quest, but just like Felwinter's Peak, you weren't really supposed to be here in Destiny 2. You could oob out of the map and then climb the mountain, But there were no rewards, no secrets for reaching the summit, and I miss this sort of passive fun. Every time I log on to Destiny 1, I always make sure to climb the peak and hang out with the skeleton, hang around the campfire, and look at the raid in the distance. Yep, that's the raid. Once I grabbed my Siva dormant fragment, I went into the Iron Temple itself. In here stood the Iron Lords, who fought Siva back in the cutscene, and little known Destiny history was playing the Iron Lord's song. So I inputted the secret codes with my fire team and played the jingle one more time. I always found it an incredibly important misstep for Bungie to ignore the Iron Temple's newest vendor, Lady Aphrodite, and she was the Iron Banner vendor in Rise of Iron as another over-delivered surprise. Aphrodite was the only Iron Lord who didn't battle at Site 6. Aphrodite would leave Earth and join a group of light bearers at an undisclosed location to explore new ways to use the light without violence. She briefly returned to Earth for the Iron Banner event until the Red War. After assisting in the liberation of the last city in Destiny 2, Aphrodite once more departed Earth and rejoined her secret group. Bungie has never shown her in Destiny 2 to my knowledge. I find her one of the most forgotten portions of Destiny, and Bungie definitely wants you to forget this plot hole, because she could have a whole expansion about her journey, and I would be there for it. Mission 2 was called The Walls Come Down, a revisit to the opening mission of vanilla Destiny, but this time it's extremely different. It's covered in even more snow, and the walls of the Cosmodrome have been cut down with hot blades, leaving cherry red marks everywhere they clashed. If you have visited the Cosmodrome in Destiny 2, this either never happened according to Bungie, or the repair team in the Cosmodrome spent all of their time here first instead of repairing the old tower. Seriously, that tower has been under construction for years. Regardless of the inconsistencies on treating Rise of Iron right in the campaign, I love the world building of not only revisiting destinations, but the level of detail to show that they had been war-torn from the last time we saw them. In this mission, the previously dark room that would kill you if you fell down was now snow piles and more open landscape. The Fallen were staying true to the lore too, since the Devil Splicers were known to be pretty crafty, so taking pieces of the Cosmodrome for their plans made sense. This mission is fairly short though, and is mostly retreading old waters to show off what the environmental team cooked up. Not really any new bosses, but a look at the Siva enhanced Fallen Splicers. These Fallen looked amazing, and it's a shame Bungie would never introduce Siva to other factions of enemies. You can imagine what each alien race would look like with the addition of Siva. These Fallen looked even more like space pirates with peg legs, an emphasis on melee combat, and most of all, some tricky bombs as martyrdom from their corpses if you shot their head. For the story, I will say it's a little lacking in stakes. Oryx was an immediate threat or the world was ending, while Siva felt more like an investigation while other battles were ongoing. At least in the opening it feels this way. Shiro tells us that Sepix is still out there, alive, so you have a choice. Do the remastered Strike of Sepix Perfected, or just do the next mission. Sepix Perfected, or the Rise of Iron variant of Devil's Lair, was more or less the same as the normal strike. But one aspect of Destiny 1 strikes I adored was that every year Bungie would go back into previously established strikes and add a variant of Taken or Siva. So for example, in the Sepix new strike, there's a chance you could have splicers instead of regular Fallen and Hive for the encounters of enemies. In the Taken King, Bungie did this to so many strikes that there's an entire playlist of them. And with Sepix, they continued that tradition. Maybe one of the ideas Bungie would take from Sepix Perfected and bring it into Destiny 2 was health gating of strike bosses, because Sepix has a bunch of health gating, needing to use the Scorch Cannons to break the shield the boss provides. It was an okay addition, but I think everyone remembers the perfected version for the song. This song proved why Bungie was so in tune with their community at the time, as this was a fan-made song that Bungie would license to put into the game for the strike. I'm still very happy this version did come to Destiny 2. After dealing with Sepix, you might notice he doesn't drop loot like in the Taken King. In fact, it's not really random. Well, this is where Bungie would raise the idea of farming loot, as every single boss now had a skeleton key chest to open for the boss-specific drop. Gone was the praying that you got something good, and instead an era of grinding keys to open chests. I still think I prefer the Taken King version of the loot system, but there's no arguing that skeleton keys were a great idea for the majority of players. And they were always guaranteed from your first Nightfall. Otherwise, grind strike playlists and hope you get one to drop. Yeah, Bungie didn't bring this back for whatever reason. They really do want you to forget. Mission 3 has us stepping into the Plaguelands for the first time, and I loved how you reached the cutoff of the land. It wasn't a grand entrance. It was a path cut down by Fallen with siva-infested wiring all over. Cutting through the rocket yard, and on the other side of it was one gigantic-looking servitor building. And clearly the raid's entrance.
I thought siva was technology, but this, it's like something alive, growing, out of control.
These devil splicers are using siva, but they cannot control it. They are like children with a new toy.
I always loved that detail. It added to the carnage venom-like side of siva. For the mission, we investigate further new areas of the Plagueland and then jump onto the walls to shut down the cannons from becoming siva controlled. By the end, taking down a siva walker tank. The mission is okay, but you do feel some of the scale Bungie was going for, with the cannons constantly firing to take down the walls. The Lightfall campaign might be bad, but this next mission is worse. So after this heartfelt cutscene with Saladin about the death of hundreds of Iron Lords at the hands of Siva in Site 6 of the Plaguelands, your next mission is to go to Mars at the Dust Palace to investigate Clovis Bray and figure out the source of Siva. The mission starts you right where you killed the Scion Flayers in the original Destiny strike. You are tasked to download the root of Siva and establish a potential weakness in it, but the mission is really forgettable. There's no midway boss, there's no exciting set piece, and it's just kind of bleh. If you're into it for the lore of Clovis and the Bray family, this was an incredible mission for you. But there wasn't even really a reference to Owl Sector as far as I could find in this mission. Before the final showdown with Siva, Shiro has one other strike for us to take down, and one that I am demanding Bungie put into Destiny 2, as it's probably my favorite strike in Destiny 1. Meet the Wretched Eye. This strike is a mix of normal Hive and Fallen Splicers, with some Siva turrets to deal with. The strike is very by the numbers, with some neat level design that looks a little like Grasp of Avarice's jumping puzzle built in. This strike is really Destiny 1 strikes at their best, as the boss is so unique, and there's an unbelievably cool mechanic at use. So, the boss is named Kovik, a Splicer priest who has combined a Void Scorch Cannon with the literal eyeball of an ogre in the room. Not only that, the ogre will actively chase whoever Kovik is looking at, because that is what the ogre sees. The ogre has clearly had some modifications done with wrecking ball hands and metal scrapped together on his body. Kovik has a giant Siva helmet on, and while you fight, there's little to no cover with shanks falling from the sky. This is, in my opinion, another reason Bungie wants you to forget about the Rise of Iron. I love some of the strikes in Destiny 2, but they just don't push creativity like this does. Now that Kovik was taken care of, it was time to clean up the Siva mess that the Fallen had spilled. Deeper into the Plaguelands we journey, and with a lot of ships, and a surprising amount of verticality. The intro is a little lackluster, so I'll save you the trouble and get to the main portion of the great new areas, the Doomed Sea. The Doomed Sea was a lava-filled landscape with a giant fallen-made tower. This area is really the part of the Plaguelands I think most people remember, and it's a shame Bungie couldn't even make this area playable in the Cosmodrome's return of Beyond Light. Into the tower we go, and past a pretty fun, albeit not as cool version of the Court of Oryx. The same tier system was here, and there were some bosses that were tough, but the rewards were a lot less, even if the sniper but not forgotten was worth chasing. Through the Archon's Forge and down into the pits of the Doom Tower to the root of Siva's infestation. It's here where we get some exposition on the real villain of this expansion.
Fallen chatter about some crazy splicer priest who wants to play God. I'm kind of with Saladin now, though. Zealots can take a back seat until the heavy lifting is done.
See, to me, this is where the DLC picks up a ton in story, and could begin to land the finish. We venture further and further down, until we're underground in the original Siva bunker. I'll let most of the gameplay do the talking, but this mission will always give me chills.
Even know someone with the Traveler's Gift could die. Until they did. Find the replicator and deactivate it. Only that will stop the flow of Siva once and for all.
Those things on the ceiling. I'm detecting DNA. They're human.
Human? That's not possible.
It's using the Iron Lord's armor. We need to go very fast.
Well done, my young wolf. Siva is gone, and the Iron Lords are at peace.
Such a tragic and horrific ending for the Iron Lords. Yes, we get to put them to rest, but how long have they been suffering a terrible fate? It was so cool seeing the faces to the names of the weapons we always used, and this character model would once again never return to Destiny. I don't get it, Bungie. What did Rise of Iron do to hurt you? Well, at least Saladin got some closure, and that's the end of the campaign. Sort of. See, you know how Bungie talked about Lightfall being this year-long story where answers would be revealed through the seasons, and they ended off Lightfall with pretty much a cliffhanger. Well, Axis was the real face to the Fallen lead, and Bungie clearly wanted you to do Wrath of the Machine. To prepare you, there was a really neat Iron Gallahorn quest to return the best exotic they ever made with a fresh coat of paint. This quest was mostly a good fetch one with collecting Wolfpack heads, but it was also a celebration of two aspects. One, victory of Destiny 1 before sending the exotic away again in Destiny 2, and the other, introducing ornaments. Ornaments and endgame in general was a massive cosmetic addition to Rise of Iron. So many sets looked incredibly impressive to the point where I'm just going to throw some music and do a quick fashion show of them. The Iron Banner was obviously going to be under a microscope, since this activity had to be good. Lady Aphrodite came in clutch with all kinds of memorable weapons like the Clever Dragon Pulse Rifle, one of the strongest primaries Destiny 1 ever had. There was 10 Iron Banner drops to collect and get the God rolls for. In my Iron Banner history video, we even talked about how reputation worked for the curated role at max level, a grind that has sadly been forgotten about. There would be even more Iron Banner weapon drops, but Bungie populated the Archon's Forge with the rest. Trials got the updates with 4 new maps, including Last Exit, which had its own massive mystery I've already covered. You also had additions like the Burning Eye Scout Rifle, which was the best primary weapon in Destiny 1 by the end. I can't talk about Trials without mentioning the ornaments. You got cat ears. I won't talk too much on this part, but the look and feel spoke for themselves, and they were all earnable ornaments. You didn't just need to pay for them. In fact, you could play the endgame and earn cosmetic drops to apply to your character. Exotic ornaments were an exception, as you had to hope from a test gift box for these, but I don't think players minded spending money at Eververse when the rest of the game was so rewarding. Rise of Iron raised the expectations for everyone, and although it was a smaller DLC, I think Bungie wants you to forget about this because the standard this DLC set might have been a reason for vanilla Destiny 2's backlash from the community. It is no mistake that players got attached to this system, and this was a quality over quantity brush. But I wish Bungie would try to incentivize cosmetics in the endgame more often. Now the Iron Temple had one more surprise, and that was Artifacts 2.0, aka build crafting in the baby stages. There was a bunch of new artifacts, and while I won't go over all of them because you'll want to fall asleep, I will tell you that each of them was named after an Iron Lord and unlocked a fresh way to play the game. Scories was so broken because you would regen super next to teammates faster, so they had to nerf it. Felwinter's was great because you could lose your super but get 2 melees and 2 grenades without the need of an exotic. It was also used for all the Titan zoom movement tech. Memory of Yolder was a troll because it was Bungie admitting there was sprint cooldown, and the other really cool one in my opinion was Memory of Radagast, which boosted sword ammo and did this really goofy Antaeus Ward like blocking where you could ping pong your sword blocks. These made artifacts actually useful for your builds, something Shadowkeep would thankfully remember about Rise of Iron. There was great callbacks like the Galahorn and the Kvastov quest for an exotic variant, with the caveat that if you saved your broken Kvastov from vanilla, you skipped a step in the quest. Now there was Trespasser, an exotic sidearm that had returned to Destiny 2, but both were just alright. I don't think anyone remembers Nemesis Star though. I keep thinking back to the Owl sector and how it came with an oddly suspicious URL. Cryptography nerds and code-savvy fans were actively putting it together during the week. An encoded message was found. Text on the page further suggested that the jumble of incomprehensible text was just one piece of an 8-part chain, and each full chain would need to be decrypted. When puzzle solvers in the fan community put their heads together, they realized that the code was in some way connected to the profile viewing it. In other words, players were seeing different data sets. Players would pour their souls into a passion project from Bungie and discovered this. It may not look like much as this, but next to the solved image, it would look familiar to those who were about to venture into Friday's brand new raid. Wrath of the Machine might be the greatest example of quality over quantity. It wasn't just a formulaic raid used as filler to keep us at least a little happy. This smaller team understood that the only way to have a small DLC stand the test of time was to pour their souls into a raid that fans could write home about. I have to admit, I am biased. This is my favorite raid in Destiny 1, and it's because every encounter inside is timeless. 2 of these encounters are in my top 10 of all time. This raid absolutely over-delivered with the amount of weapons and loot a raid could offer. For starters, there was 10 weapons from Wrath of the Machine, not including the exotic. Of these, only some were found in the normal mode, while the rest were found in hard mode. These had the equivalent of enhanced perks on the weapons too, something that the Witch Queen would look at and thankfully copy 6 years later. Once the raid was beaten, Bungie didn't just want you to beat it once, they wanted players to solve the puzzle. Monitors hidden in the raid, each with the iconic Siva symbol, needed to be activated to reach an extra chest. The community pieced together one of the most legendary puzzles in gaming's history, dating back to the Owl Sector ARG, which turned out to be a map with a key to the puzzle, and helped uncover the final monitor. This led to a quest that infamously led to Clan Math Class finding its name, as Dado, Leopard, Watts, and the clan would be the first to discover the Outbreak Prime exotic pulse rifle. You would think Bungie would be on a crash course to bring this raid back into Destiny 2, since it's widely considered one of the best of all time, and the one raid that you just can't play in Destiny 2 that's from Destiny 1. But this year, Bungie stated that they have no plans on another raid for 2024 after the final shape. So once again, Rise of Iron fans come away empty-handed. Maybe Bungie doesn't want to bring this one back because of how high the stakes were set for the raid. There were cosmetics from almost every challenge, like the shader nanopoesis from completing hard mode with all Wrath armor sets on. See, that's the thing. There was a constant want for more. Bungie is very, very good at business, whether you agree or disagree. And I don't think Bungie being good at business is always this evil thing that we always try to make it. Bungie is constantly tugging on our wallets for some nice small bites, leaving us eagerly awaiting the feast. If Wrath of the Machine were to come back, then they might not have anything left to rely on for the past to keep people interested in the craving of that feast. Part of my cynical side thinks that this is why some of the Destiny 2 raids remain vaulted. But with Vault of Glass back in the game, Crota's End back in the game, and King's Fall back, I think the main reason Wrath of the Machine hasn't returned is because Bungie doesn't have Siva in the files, and doesn't want to make it again. More specifically, remaking an entire enemy faction of Fallen and the aesthetics of Wrath for just one raid. The story ended with the raid for the most part, so they don't have seasonal content to move forward with the story of Siva and this expansion. I think it's possible that inside of the Traveler for the final shape, in this memory state where we retread all the past events, we could see Bungie design some Siva Fallen, and that would lead for a path to Wrath of the Machine. But they already said that they have no plans for a raid. And for now, Wrath of the Machine will remain a relic of history, a time of great stories for the community, and a raid that may never get a remaster or another acknowledgement from Bungie. They had plots set up for Siva, like the 0 Hour mission, that ended up turning into Stasis, or the Exodus Crash Strike with the mention of Siva, but no Siva was even seen in the mission. But alas, Rise of Iron is just filler, I guess. I think a lot of the reason Bungie might not want Wrath to return is because of an era commonly associated with Wrath, the Age of Triumph. If I told you that Vault of Glass, Crota's End, King's Fall, and Wrath of the Machine would get added challenges, mechanics, loot, and ornaments to go with strike scoring, new exotics to grind, new leveling, PvP balance, new Prison of Elders challenges, strike revamps, and more, you would probably call me crazy in 2023. But in 2016, this smaller team at Bungie wanted to give players a reason to call Destiny the complete package. I remember the Act Man talking about how he hated Destiny Vanilla, and then he came back in Age of Triumph and absolutely loved the game. Act Man wasn't alone either. I think Age of Triumph changed the perspective of Destiny to every single YouTuber or critic in general. This was what Destiny players wanted, and this Bungie was so in touch with its player base that I don't think that corpo overlords could even interfere. It was like this was something to hold the players over, while they went on to butcher the core elements of Destiny in the vanilla release of 2. Bungie will not have an Age of Triumph after the final shape, but instead episodes that will cost a combined $45 on top of a $50 final shape expansion. Age of Triumph was a free update, so long as you had Destiny's previous expansions, and I just don't think modern day Bungie would even let that slide, because we as the fans have proved that we're willing to pay for even bad seasons. I don't think it's all the fault of ours, because realistically there's been good seasons, so you never know what you're gonna get. I believe that Rise of Iron would yet again over-deliver in this aspect, and if Age of Triumph 2 existed, Bungie would price it very high, but I'd be willing to pay for that, because that is the stuff that I want to pay for. Hey, Cynical Brain, you take a rest. But Bungie has shown very little attention to the idea of Age of Triumph 2. Ignoring Rise of Iron might lead to more fans forgetting how much bang for your buck you've had in 2016. I didn't really bring up the holiday events here because it's something I've talked about a lot in my Age of Triumph video, and I do have a video planned, or maybe it's out before this one, on seasonal holiday events and the rise, fall, up, down, left, right, A, B, A, B. So where does that leave us? We have gone over the business of the small team making filler into something special, where a faceless villain can outshine some of Destiny's most pivotal baddies. We have talked about the aspects of the game that Bungie might want you to forget about, like the raid, the self-obsessed story, and the reality of Siva not being designed in for Destiny 2, yet with the only reference in the Lie mission, which never left an open chapter to Siva. Does this mean Rise of Iron's raid Wrath of the Machine can't come back? No. Wrath could come back, but with all of the factors listed, it's not hard to see why it's taken so long. 2024 might not be the year. Hell, it might be 2026, a whole decade later. But Wrath, one day, will be back. But how long before we just stop caring about the game? Until Bungie has us on the hook for a little bit more nostalgia. It's not this evil principle, it's just business. And sometimes, business wins over creativity and player agency. So was this video one disguised retrospective about Rise of Iron, the expansion that Bungie wants you to forget about? Yeah, it was. And I hope this video was a good one. Vanilla Destiny 2, you're up next. I'll see you guys next time. Love you guys.